go back. We skipped over it. We got on a little bit of a tangent there, but let's back up to the beginning of the company and your transition to Canada, working as agronomist for Cargill. And you alluded to it, but in the speech about how you got working with some colonies and optimizing and calibrating their equipment, and then they asked for it, and then obviously one thing led to another. Here you are. But tell us about how you got to building a company from zero.
It was wild. It was really wild. It was always playing around with some of those prototypes. And then when I came to Canada, I was working on a farm in Ontario, like I said, on a forage harvester, and then came out west, worked on a couple other farms, wanted to see the West. And then Cargill had that open job for an agronomist, and I just applied. They were looking for somebody with practical experience. Well, and there was, like, yeah, we have an opening in Brandon, Nesbitt. I was like, I don't know anybody in Brandon. I don't even know what Nesbitt is, but I'll try that. So moved to Brandon. I happened to move in as a roommate, and I lived with them for years. It's awesome friends. Their mom and dad, they call me son. Like, I was very fortunate to meet really great people in Brandon. It's like home now. So I started working for Cargill, Nesbitt, and Carberry as agronomist, and then run into that colony, and they had a lot of fusarium in there in their wheat sample. And and I was like, oh, dang it. I was the agronomist that told him, what to do in the crop and spray and all that stuff. And it's like, I better go out there and check, because the elevator didn't really want to take the stuff. It was bad. It was a very bad year. Everybody had fusarium. So I went out there, and I'm not sure how much detail you want, because I
what year was that?
Detailed here.
Yeah, what year was that?
15. I started with Cargill. 15. I came out.
Tell the story how you want it.
Okay.
Tell the story how you want it. We got lots of time. We got lots of tape here.
It's I went out there, figured out they were throwing out 3.5 bushel in the first place in wheat. Okay, they had I think at that time they were running three combines, and so we reduced that harvest loss down to about 0.5 bushel. And at the same time, used our prototypes to drop more pans and figure out what's in the sample in the grain tank versus what's coming out the back. And all the farmers in the area, they were talking about this fusarium, and everybody says, oh, I just turn up the wind and just blow the fusarium out the back. Just turn it up a bit. I said, yeah, that's great, but how much? And there's so many other things inside a combine that make or break that, right? So, and how much more do you throw out the back? So we set up the combines different. We dialed in the samples. I took some samples back to the elevator. So all of a sudden, we were blowing the fusarium out the back, and they were able to market the grain through the elevator. Some of it was a 3. There was maybe a few loads of number 2. Field was a little variable, but again, we did a lot more testing for that. But it helped them. So, and the lucky thing on this, I have to say that too, because there's always a little bit of luck in life too. So it's not all what you know and what you do in the moment. You also need a little bit of luck. And the luck was there that the fusarium moved into the kernels fairly early, and the fusarium kernels were very light, and it was easy to blow them out the back. But you had to prove of what actually comes out the back versus what's in the tank. And that's what we did with the pans. We were able to verify that. So the week after, they called in and I said, hey, Marcel, do you know how much money you saved us there last week? We reckon about, $65,000, $70,000 ish that you saved us there. I'm like, oh, wow, that's cool. And they're like, yeah, you do have some of those gadgets? Because I said, wow, not really. And then, and they were buying, all of a sudden they were buying fertilizer from me and seed and whatnot, right? And then head office is like, so why is this agronomist selling that stuff down there, right? And it's like, well, I have these relationships because I did this and this with a combine, and there's a few other farmers I did this with, and they're like, oh, well, use it. Like, use that thing as much as you want. Like, just put it in your agronomy program. And most of the other, and not knocking them, but most of the other agronomists, they would go on vacation and when harvest is going on. And fair enough, they work their butts off all spring spraying. They work really hard. But I would go out at harvest, and people throw out 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 bushel out the back. And not just canola. People talk about canola a lot. We see it in oats, in wheat. We even see it in soybeans and corn in some areas where where it's not, and it's not always the driver's fault. I'm not blaming the driver. Bushel Plus is not blaming the driver. It can also be the combine or something set up wrong or something broken. But seeing that clicked something in my brain. I was like, wow, I work my butt off all spring and try to sell the best seed, the best fertilizer, and sell the spray and this thing. And hey, this is a half a bushel more, 2 bushel more here. And then at harvest, we're trucking 3 out the back. It's like, well, why? Yeah. I said to my farmers, I might as well just stay at home all spring. And again, I want to reiterate that, not to make the farmers in Brandon look bad here. I've seen the same thing in Germany, Eastern Europe, Russia, and Siberia, Brazil, anywhere I went, Canada, the same thing happened all over the place. And that's why our educational sessions are so successful right now, where we do combine clinics and farmers come to us. We did a bunch of stuff in Texas and Florida this spring. We were teaching people how to grow carinata. It's like a canola-like crop, but they have a lot of experience with like cotton and corn. So they want to learn about this kind of stuff. So we did a lot of combine clinics down there. But then we also did combine clinics in Montana and in Manitoba, in areas where canola is normal since decades, right? So we're doing these clinics, and we have a farmer, specifically one example I'll pick, comes to us and says, I've been doing 30 years of custom combining. What I've learned today, I've never heard anywhere else before. Like, you guys know combines, and what you explain makes total sense. And I'll try that. And a matter of fact, some of the stuff I know will work because I tried this and this and this before. So we're connecting a lot of that knowledge now with a Bushel Plus and the value that goes out there. Because for us, it's not about selling. It was never, go back to starting the company, it was never about selling something and making money on this. It was always about, oh, wow, there is something and there's a solution to it. There's value. It's all about the value add to the farm. Because if you don't bring something to a farmer that adds value, don't bother. They have enough stuff on the go. They're busy. It has to be fast, quick, and easy. I'm a farm kid. I know how it is. When the combine sits in the field for 2 minutes, it feels like 3 hours. It bugs everybody. I get it. That's why it has to be fast, quick, and simple. That's what our solutions are. And at the same time, you have to also show the value of it. So, for example, we've did a bunch of demos and tests in our software. So our Smart Drop app will break it down, not just to bushel per acre loss, but also to dollars per acre, and even more interesting, dollars per hour lost. And there is a lot of examples out there where it's $800 to $1,200 an hour lost out of the machine out the back. So I never made $1,200 an hour. I don't know if you ever made that, Dan, in your job there.
I have not, no.
But
no.
And then tell me you don't have time to set up the combine for 20 minutes if we're chucking out $1,200 out the back. And the best example is here, our QDM video. I don't know if you've seen that from Quick Dick McDick there, where he did the whole video on the whole setup, where he walks exactly through all these examples. And I can get very technical now because it's not just measuring losses, it's about calibrating the loss sensor. We don't want to have the farmers dropping that pan every 5 minutes. We want to calibrate the loss sensor as you go, so you can trust your sensor display in the cab. Because when that is not calibrated properly and benchmarked of what's, like when it's in the green in the cab, there should be less loss out the back. And when it's red, it should be a lot loss out the back. That should be correlating. But you can change the sensitivity in between that sensor and the display, which means you have a sensor plate. And if a lot of kernels are hitting that sensor in the back, in correlation, that display should go up. But if you turn the sensitivity down, then a lot of kernels are hitting this plate and the display only goes into green. And you fool yourself. Same the other way around. The sensitivity is all the way up and the kernels hit the plate, it will show a lot of loss and we will just start to drive slower. So with our pan, what we do is we calibrate that loss sensor and the display that okay, if there is in the green, there is little loss. And then you can actually trust that display and probably can drive faster with your combine. And we have a lot of farmers now that are pushing more acres with their combine. It comes all back to sustainability and less fuel. And it's not just the drop pen or the smart pen system, as we call it now, it's also the concaves. And take that further to automation. If somebody out there sells you a combine and tells you just push the button and it will just push the auto button and go, just you can stop the conversation right there, because it doesn't work. That's not how it's designed. If that automation software does the same thing as the user does in the moment. It looks for the display, if it's green or red, and then adjust the combine accordingly, which means if that sensor is not calibrated, the automation doesn't run the combine efficient enough or even slows it down. And we have that feedback from the highest people in OEMs that are coding that software and that are the engineers working on those machines, because we work with the major OEMs and they've bought, every single OEM has our Bushel Plus smart pen systems, and they use them in their R&D department, their demo department, their marketing. And they have given us the feedback of, yeah, we're not setting up one of those machines without a pen because we know the crane sensor needs to be calibrated. But that message has to spread to the farmers, because a lot of the marketing out there is push the button and go, and that doesn't work. And so a lot of our job is education, and sometimes, it's tough because we do a lot of the education that should come from a lot of other sources. And as you see, I get pretty passionate about.
Well, it's a crazy cultural thing too. As you're talking, a whole bunch of stuff came up. But one of the things I was thinking about too is when I sold John Deere sprayers, and how much the nozzles, the part of the sprayer that actually meters the chemical and the nozzle calibration and everything like that, was so much of an afterthought when you're dealing with so many dollars and what the crop is worth, and the value of the passes, and there's all kinds of considerations of systemic versus contact, and drift and pressure and proximity to the target. Yeah. So it was really interesting, because that was the last conversation. I usually separated that out and said, okay, let's talk about that once the heat of the battle with the, negotiating for the deal of the sprayer is done here. Let's take a breath.
Yeah. By the way, you got to calibrate this thing.
Yeah. Yeah. But come back when we're fresh and we'll talk about the nozzles and stuff, because by the time we were done dealing on the sprayer and all the tires and the horsepower and how did it ride and, the ergonomics of where the controls are and the size of the booms, it was like the nozzles was an afterthought. And it's incredible. I was also thinking, as you're talking about the cumulative effects, if you can just get better in some of those areas, get your sensors more accurate, get your combine more productive, use less fuel, throw less over, get more into the bin, have less volunteers, on and on and on and on. Get rid of fusarium.
Volunteers, yes, volunteers, right? More tillage again, more spraying. There is so many things that are coming. It's not, that's why I tell people, it's not just a drop pen, it's a system to learn more about your machine to make your whole farm more efficient.
Are you going to make a chopper that kills weed seeds?
We're not going to build a chopper that kills weed seeds, because we're working with those 3 OEMs that built them. We work with them already. And the funny thing too, in order to make these mills work, guess what they need? A smart pen system, because you have to make sure that the weed seeds are actually going through the mill and getting destroyed. For everybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, it's a mill that sits behind the sieves, that takes all the material that comes off the sieves and destroys it like a hammer mill. And it's supposed to destroy the weed seeds that are coming through the combine. It's coming from Australia, actually, that we've done a lot of work with them and still continue to work.
Redicop?
As well, Redicop, IHSD, and C Terminator, all 3. Yeah. And they're actually all 3 in our app. So in our Smart Drop app, it's customized to figure that out, what your grain loss is with these mills, plus where your weed seeds are coming from. For example, the weed seeds have to go over your sieve in the mill to get destroyed so they don't regrow. But if your combine is set up wrong and your weed seeds are going through the rotor and you put them through the chopper, you spread the whole weed seeds bypass the mill and spread it out again in the field, and it keeps regrowing. So guess what? Concaves and knowledge about how the combine works, and then figure out with a drop pen if you found crushed weed seeds or not, is very important to set up these mills. So yeah, and that's why they are in our Smart Drop app as like a default already. So we've worked with their engineers, and I have a lot of respect for those companies, because in Australia, it's needed. Is weed seed resistance is a lot bigger down there as it is here, but it's coming. And that's a whole other podcast we can do on weed seed resistance and harvest weed seed control. Like there's a lot going on
Well,
there.
people
But
should
when
go to your clinics, obviously. I mean, we can't. I mean, I'm sure you could talk about a lot of this stuff for days.
yeah, that's you gotta keep me in the line here today at this
Oh,
podcast a
I
little
no,
bit. So, but
I was wondering though, why wouldn't you become the equipment optimization company eventually? Because I can see similar gaps in seeding, spraying, spreading, all that stuff.
it's it's I like the way you think, Dan. Are you looking for a job, by the way? Like, yeah,
I might
like,
be. You never know. You
no,
never know.
you're way too successful. It's all good.
No,
I'm
no,
just
no, no.
I'm just
If
bugging
only,
you.
if only we felt that way, right?
Oh
It always
man,
feels like
if
I just feel I get so humbled all the time,
do
and
you feel like you're not like do you feel like you're not doing enough?
horribly. I feel horribly.
Mhm.
Yeah, I struggle with a lot of that, and some of it too is just insecurities, right? And you look back and you look at all the stuff I did out of insecurity, trying to be this or that, and hopefully we get wiser and calmer and more mature over time. But it's a combination of things. But then I have to remind myself, I'm living my dream, like and obviously scale is one perspective. But when I think about it, I have an awesome company. I'm extremely proud of our product and what we do. Have the privilege of working with a $12 billion, waste management company on environmentally friendly
That's huge.
fertilizer. Got a fantastic team, that incredible. The team's just
That you
great,
do, yeah. They're good
and it
people.
affords me the opportunity to do this. Like when you get talking, marketing, but not so much even the marketing. I love, I guess, ideas and sharing marketing would be like combining and calibrating is to you. But at the end of the day, it's the net result is I wouldn't have been afforded this opportunity to get to know you like this and share this with the world. This is my flow. This is my fortune. This is what makes me happy. And it's a huge honor that I just hope everybody can kind of find that thing that works for them in the same context. And so, yeah, whether you walk out of this show into, you know, a shitty little apartment and basement suite in Brandon or a mansion, that doesn't take away, that doesn't make you happy one way or the other. It's these moments that are highly valuable,
Well,
I think.
well,
But
I have the basement apartment, so I do have that
exactly, me too.
as a
It's not like
roommate.
yeah, I'm not same with me, bro.
It's but
I'm a
here's the
twice
thing, like
divorced single guy. I don't have any.
yeah.
I don't have a 6 bedroom house in Brookwood yet.
Yet.
So,
But here's
wow.
the thing, man. You should be proud of that. But it's hard when you think about this for yourself. But let me ask you a question. Like, was it the same for you when you had a job before you started your own business? Did you have the same feelings that you were not doing enough and pushing yourself, or did it really start stressing you more when you became self-employed? You know what I mean? Was there a switch ever in your life?
I think I've always had a lot of the same background that you have because my dad was an extremely hardworking guy, as well as my mom. Not to say my mom didn't work really hard, but obviously we relate to our fathers in terms of the farm and the career and that context. And I think it was just one of those things where, like any farmer or anybody in business, how many acres is enough? How much equipment is enough? How much success is enough? But when I was specifically to your question, um, when I was selling sprayers, um, really a lot of my career was thinking like, am I going to sell enough to have a job? Am I doing enough? And really at the time, I would say there maybe wasn't that structure that really gave me that context to understand, am I doing a good job or what's the proper metrics? Like it was pretty much, and I appreciated that. And I'm not saying anything against anybody, in that context of, like, I was very grateful for the opportunity, but it was more or less like, you know, here's a notebook, here's a truck, here's a laptop, go. So
Mm.
now I
Yeah.
recognize, I can see the struggle in some of the staff, some of the times when they care a lot and they want to do really good, but they're so new, they're anxious about making mistakes and they think it's going to have an impact on their career and whatnot. And the funny thing is too, I find there's an inverse relationship between like how anxious you are about that and how insecure you are about that and how concerned you are about that and your actual performance. because when you stop making mistakes is when you gain that certain level of confidence. So looking back, I realized there's all kinds of things, just like being insecure about what you do, not valuing what you do when you're doing it. My dad gave me some great advice. I was to remind myself, hey, do whatever you're doing now to the best of your ability and really enjoy it. And that probably goes back to that old wisdom where he, intuited about flow before he probably never read the book. I know he never read the book, but Harvey's never really said to me like, hey, I read this book and you should, he's not a big reader guy, but he intuited that if you do what you're doing really well, like super good things will come from that one thing from another. But I had a struggle enjoying what I was doing in the moment. And now that I look back on my sprayer career, it's been such a weird thing because, of course, you see people at trade shows from all over Western Canada. My last year, I sold like 70 sprayers, right? So that gives you an idea. I did it for 13 years, 70 deals made. I probably talked to a lot more people, but I didn't, at the time, I didn't know how to value those relationships as much as I should have. And now I look back and people say, oh yeah, I still have the sprayer you sold me, or, oh, I remember you were a good salesman. And I always thought it was kind of adversarial, because when people are buying equipment, it's such an emotional thing. And you're kind of the bad guy given the dollars difference. You're kind of the asshole salesperson that comes out with the pointy shoes and the cockies and this, oh, this cocksucker is going to ruin my life here with the price he's going to give me. But now, but now they're like, a lot of people say like, yeah, I mean, I don't not to too much, but some people have said like, oh, you're the best salesman that we ever had, and it was a different era too. Like it was the Wild West, so you could go out and horse wrangle and just really mix it up. And we just got that shit flowing, like shit through a goose. It was fun. The flip side of that was at a certain point too, just like you in the forest or in the forest harbinger, the harvest forager, the corn forage harvester. You get to a point where it's like we say in Saskatchewan, shooting fish in a barrel. I don't know if you've heard that expression.
Oh,
but it's too easy. It got too easy.
Okay, yeah.
Shooting fish in a barrel. That's a Saskatchewanism. And so that's where I took a wild leap into the great unknown as an entrepreneur, leapt off a cliff, built a plane on the way down. I barely landed the rig the first time because I didn't succeed. Like I was working for another company. I was hoping to be a partner. That was the plan. That was the agreement. But everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face, said Mike Tyson. And that's very true, although I've never boxed. But that is entrepreneurship. Yeah. Like day one, things went horribly sideways with basically a fatal accident that the owner suffered with. We'd lost his brother and his.
Sorry, man.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it was just something I walked into, and this guy went through this situation, and that was the context of the coming into the company, right? And that was the day after we made an agreement, and the day before I was supposed to start. So, but you know how that goes too. You know how like life can take some wild turns. Because you went through that yourself. You almost lost your life in an accident in Australia. Tell us about that.
Yeah, there's, you just touched on a lot of things here.
Like
so
4 other episodes.
We're covering a lot of ground here today. So listen in for part 2 and 3 next week.
Season 6. Yeah. Strictly Marcel Kringe.
It's season 6. People may get sick of me already after this episode here. No, there's a lot of things we can talk about. Australia, it's been a life-changing event, 100%. Let me touch on one other thing here quickly, because I gotta take the opportunity here on a little bit of marketing, without taking away from those life-changing events, because yes, that is a big portion of life. And I'm sorry you had to go through that kind of stuff. It shapes you, and it sometimes life kicks you right to the guts. And you think you have a plan, and then something happens, and boom. And that's part of my job right now is firefighting. Like people, oh, what do you do now? I got the fancy title, the fancy CEO founder title, but that doesn't mean that I'm just sitting around doing nothing and everybody else does a job. Like I'm still with them in the trenches. I'll let them handle it. But it's where I was going with this is that I have the title, but it's the firefighting. That's where I was going. You still have to run the day-to-day business. Something happens, you have to address it right away. Something bigger happens, and you're always in between all these things to keep everything going. And you mentioned the equipment optimization company, right? I mean, we're very much focused on harvest. But interesting thing, what we did, we're actually continuing business. We are continuing the business of a company called Aberhart training, so ag training in Europe. So we took on that work last summer, and we took over all the assets of the company, where the owner is going to retire. And he did the last 15 plus years, nothing else but combine education, combine clinics for dealers, for farmers. And it was all over Europe. He's also done some stuff in South America, North America, really interesting guy. But again, time to retire. So, and he has also done forage harvester clinics and efficiencies around that. So it's something we're getting into as well. We got some requests in Europe for this already. We're working very closely with our German distributor who's executing that for us in Europe. So, we're not, it's definitely around equipment, but mostly around very focused on harvest right now. We definitely want to, I don't want to stand in front of a group and say the wrong things or talk about stuff that I'm not comfortable with. I want to make sure we give sound advice, and we are passionate about harvest. So let's start with harvest.
But there's the same kind of opportunities to calibrate your seeder, your sprayer, your spreader in the same fashion. And you might not have the same degree of length and width and girth of gold nugget that you found with, hey, buddy, you just saved me 70 grand. Like, will you marry my daughter?
Yeah. That hasn't happened yet, but you never know.
Keep at it. It's going to happen any day.
Yeah.
I love your product so much. I want you to marry my daughter.
Well, here's what farmers have said at trade shows. So, and it blew me away. They come to the booth and I quote, okay, thanks for building this and thanks for bringing this to market. This has made my life a lot easier. I'm like, pardon me, what? So like, it's been a lot of those relationships with our customers have really turned into like friendships, family. Like it's been a journey and a half, 100%. So in this ag training now is another step of us evolving as the harvest optimization company, 100%. And back to people that have helped me. I wouldn't be here without a lot of good people. That's why I'm so passionate about helping others, doing the right thing, and have the right culture where, when we hire new people, it's, I tell them, if you walk into a dealership, I expect everybody to talk the same. Doesn't matter if it's the person that cleans the toilets or the CEO or the owner of the company. We talk to everybody the same. We want people that respect each other, and the parts people or the manager. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a manager or whatever else. Like we talk to everybody the same.
To your point, the CEO should be cleaning the piss on the toilet, just like anybody else do.
Well,
right?
Sorry, maybe I said, yeah. Maybe I said that the wrong way, but what I try to say in my head is,
I agree.
When I walk into a dealership, I say hi to the person that cleans the toilets the same way I say hi to the CEO of that company.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we all just human beings, okay? We're all just robots. And I wouldn't be here today if I would not have that help from the people along the way. And that is people that helped me learn English, people that helped me living in their basements when I was working on farms, coming to Canada fresh. I lived on an air mattress for the first year and a half because I didn't know if I would get a work visa in Canada. I had applied for a work visa, but I'm an immigrant. I came.
That's why you're so tall. You were laying on an air mattress. You got
basically, yeah. It was
you're only 6'2". So you're only 6'2" when you came. Now you're 6'3.5".
Yeah, they're just about. With all the cowboy boots, 6'5". Yeah. So. Just some of that kind of stuff. I want to give back and keep that culture alive. Because again, we're not robots. I always say that. All the mental health stuff are too, passionate about that and have that the right way laid out in our team as well. We're not robots. We're all just people.
But that's the beauty of where you've gotten to now. You do have the capability and the capacity to give back. And I think that just like being a father or husband or, community volunteer or giving back, those roles will shape you in such a way that it's very fruitful. And when you talk about mental health as a business owner, that's pressure. There's a different kind of pressure, but it's not necessarily always the pressure of external events. Because I found in business, I should be theoretically, I should be completely non-reactionary, because technically given my experience to date, I never know if it's a challenge or an opportunity, or I never know that that challenge isn't going to open up some kind of opportunity I would never have dreamt of if that didn't happen. So we shouldn't react to events, but it's a mental health that comes from putting the pressure on yourself. I already know you, buddy, because we're a lot alike in that way.
Yeah, it's tough because you care, right? You do really care, and it's tough to see this in the moment sometimes. And you're right. The best things could come out of the worst things that may happen to you. But
Sometimes
it
you got
is
to say
a
it's just business. It's like a sport. That's something I've had to learn, and self-differentiate and become detached. Like, okay, it's business. It's like a sport. I mean, there's winners, there's losers. There's, you can compete against somebody, but you don't have to hold it against them as a human being. You can be kind of respectful and still have some, beer with them after.
Yeah, see, it's like Dan is not sulfur fertilizer, right? Marcel is not a smart pen. Or in other words, Dan is not the company. Marcel is not the company.
Yeah.
Like the company can fail, knock on wood.
That's a tough one.
It's a very tough one. But you are still Dan, and I'm still Marcel.
Am I?
But
Are we though?
But here's
we
the
haven't
thing.
tested that theory.
We're broken inside. I tell you that right now. You and
I
me
know.
will be broken inside. We'll be broken before it even comes to that point, because we will be devastated if we even feel the slight way of that. And trust me, I think about Germans think about worst case scenario first before they think about anything else. It's horrible.
I can extrapolate right out to like jumping on a bridge. Like, this is going to happen. That's going to happen. Then this is going to happen. Then this is going to happen. And then I need to go jump into the icy waters of the, the Assiniboine River, and just, it's over. But
and then you look over, and then you look in your head, you look over on that bridge. You're like, there's 3 other entrepreneurs being. And I know it's a tough topic to joke about, but I know how you're joking about it, and I know exactly what you mean, because you get in your head, right? You're like, oh shit, now this has happened, and this, and now it's this, and what if I can't do payroll? I can't do this. Like it's tough. It's a lot of this is a mental game, and is the perseverance of pulling through tough shit, and it's a grind. It is not an easy thing. It's not for everybody. And I'm not saying that we're better or special in terms of better than other people. That's not what I'm saying at all. I have respect for everybody out there that has a job or has their own business. But the pressure on this is something that you can only appreciate if you had it or went through. And if you don't have, I mean, a lot of people probably don't have it to the extent that you and me have it, because I know you a bit by now, so we're getting very passionate about these things and very caring. But I think you also need that in order to drive the business to the next level, in order to care for your people. If you're completely heartless and ruthless, you can maybe do something for a couple of years, but is that sustainable? If everybody thinks after a couple of years that you're the biggest asshole and you don't respect people, that is not good. That is not sustainable. That means you don't care. It
depends what your macro. I've met some really great business people that through some lens, maybe it's I don't know how to say this, but it's almost I've met some really ruthless business people.
And yet there's enough out there, unfortunately. Sorry, I had to say that.
No, it's true, but you also have to understand that the way that they view it doesn't make them a bad person, because they could be a different way with their family. It's just that the way that they see it. And it to me, it's like a race car driver who knows the rules well enough to push so hard that they're just on the cusp of breaking it. Or sometimes they break the rules, but they still win the race. And does that make them a bad person? So sometimes you got to look at the context of it all. But I know that there's a fine line there. Like for myself, I'm probably not the number one business guy on planet Earth. Let's be real. I could have made a lot more money if I had done things differently, but that wasn't always the most important thing to me. I think the most important thing to me was feeling like I'm growing, that my future is going to be bigger than my past, that I'm going to be continually expanding and evolving. Because where I get into that German doom mode is when I feel like my world might shrink. Then I start extrapolating dark futures where it's like, I don't want to be in that future.
Yeah. I can second that. I have I couldn't say it any better. And it comes to the human aspect too. You know, like you had Trevor on your podcast from Ready to
Yeah.
Cup Manufacturing, right?
Yeah.
Awesome guy. Got a
Yeah.
ton of respect for the guy. Yeah, you had lots of great people on your podcast that I respect a lot.
It's been
And
awesome. Yeah.
I'm picking on Trevor here, you know, and we might be running out of time for some of the other stuff, but I want to give Trevor a shout out here because when I was in Australia in the hospital, um, he was coming to Australia for business, but he made a point of coming from the airport to the hospital, and we had a 45-minute visit, and he gave me one of the biggest TED talks I ever had in my life. And then he went out of my room and he turned around and he says, and do not call me in the next 6 months about business. If you call me and you want to talk business, I hang up the phone. You're going to take that time to care for yourself and get better because you're pretty beaten up. And, you know, he took that time. He's busy. Busy is not even a word. He's super busy, okay? And he takes the time to drive with his distributor there at the time to the hospital, tries to find me too. That's the other thing too, is he was able to find me there too through an interesting connection, and visits me, takes the time out of his day to tell me about his own life and how he built his business and how it would just help me to put this in perspective, right? And then he's like, so sorry, I really got to go. We got a bunch on the go. And I was like, yeah, no, thank you. Like, you know, I'm just strapped to a bed and like, that's Trevor from Radicop. And he made, he said like Marcel, you can be if you can sell millions and millions of dollars in the world, but if you're the biggest asshole, nobody comes to visit you in a hospital. Just remember that. Because this is the reason, like business is business, and you know, you're worried about your business right now and all the stuff in the future, but you have to get yourself better first. That's what he meant by that. Like you have to get yourself better first. And obviously people are helping you because they know you. And this is not easy for me to say that. This is not supposed to sound arrogant. See, now my brain kicks in again about these things. But
yeah, it's a default mold. You know, you gotta work through it. Yeah.
The default mode. But you know,
what is that like though, Marcel, when you're laying in a hospital room in another country with, you know, on the other side of the world with your company, your baby, your everything, so far away, and you can't really do anything. Like you can move a little finger, like Morse code there.
It was rough.
You know, you can move your eyeballs, but you were pretty banged up. What happened?
Yeah, it was pretty rough. I had a lot of fractures in my upper body. So basically you lay in your bed and you can look at the ceiling. Like you look at the ceiling because you're basically strapped down to bed. And the first few days I didn't even know what was all broken and what was all going on. And the first couple of days I was out like a light. Like the first call to home was basically Marcel is not going to make it through the night. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff that I'm not sure if we're able to talk about all of this stuff today, looking at the time and looking at all the stories we have ahead of us here. But that is a life-changing event and a big learning curve. And when you ask me about just moving a finger, you know, my sister she's a vet in Germany. She has her own podcast too. Incredible lady. Again, I can talk half an hour now about her, how proud I am about her, because she's also a life and business coach, yoga teacher, starts her own stuff, wrote a book after she helped me in Australia about, you know, tough times and helping people with mental health. So she's helping people about mental health and stuff. She's very, like, she drives with a bike. There's only 2 females in Europe that drove with the pedal bike all the way across Europe. She drove 7,600 kilometers all the way from Spain, Portugal down there, all the way through Norway, Russia border in 2.5 months by herself.
Unbelievable.
Sleeping in a hammock and all these kind of things. But I know this is the stuff that it's just cool. But she was able to come down there and she's on the laptop and I try to tell her who to pay and where to send e-transfers and because nobody had passwords or anything at home. That was a big learning curve. You know, I just had quit my job that summer. Right. And in the fall I was self-employed, went down there and then, a pretty bad car accident that I don't wish anybody ever at all. And thankfully, everybody got out of that accident well and alive again. That's the biggest thing I want to say here. Okay,
What
there's a lot of
happened?
people that helped.
Tell
that.
us what happened.
Well, two cars collided on a country road, and by the time they got me out there, they figured out I had 12 fractures down my spine, top to bottom, starting on my neck. My left shoulder broken in half, almost like the two fractures almost touched in the middle. A bunch of broken ribs, shattered rib cage. Left arm still that was shattered. And then left open pelvis break. And that the only reason why I'm still here is that nothing shifted of these fractures. So basically, all these fractures happened, but all like the muscle and the meat, whatever else, they kept everything in place. So, and the fractures didn't move.
Oh,
So, but I could have been paralyzed 5 times over because it's the first responders. I got to shout out to them because thankfully they were all trained on first aid. A lot of farmers down there are trained on first aid because they're firefighters in Australia. Okay, so they knew not to move me when they found me. And then the first responders, flying doctors in Australia, so the equivalent to stars, got me to the hospital because I was way far away. I was out in the boonies somewhere. Go to the hospital, and then the first 2-3 days and nights I was just out like light, and I didn't even know I was going to make it. And the only thing now that, again, the doctor said you're alive because nothing shifted. You are a hair, like a millimeter away from a titanium shoulder, a millimeter away from a titanium hip, and another millimeter away from a wheelchair or a wooden box. Like, you shouldn't be here technically with all these things that you have. And not sure if we're ready to talk about all of these things, but
why not?
I think at some point the story time and some of the stories are, I want to give the right credit to the people, because two quick stories. Again, if I start the story, is another hour, but it's
do the stories.
There's people that I didn't even know before I went to Australia, and they came to the hospital and basically adopted me to help me out.
Right.
They walked in the hospital because they were farmers and custom harvesters, and they walked in and said, "Hey, we heard about this. How can we help you?"
That's
an
incredible.
agronomist they were like an agronomist that I spent time with before the accident. Him and his wife, they flew to Perth and spent the first 3 days and 3 nights with me, sitting in intensive care beside my bed until my sister came and took over. They heard about it. They flew there and they did all the paperwork. They tried to communicate to people. I learned. So these are the stories I want to tell.
Because you probably couldn't share much in the beginning. You probably weren't able to really.
Well, there's just a lot going on with everything. Like, just it's a big mental thing too, right? Like, you gotta work through that you're pretty much, when doctors come in, multiple doctors, it's like, well, I've never seen something like this on the x-rays. Like, I don't know how you're alive. And just working, like, I had to learn how to walk again. So the first physio is like, you're like, they're touching your toe and moving your toe 5 times, and they're like, yeah, that's physio for today. I'm like, what? Okay. So, but first,
I'm not going to be here for 14
like,
years, man. Like, we got to speed this up. I got a company to run.
Like, do you feel that? Do you feel this? It's like all about, they didn't even know if I was paralyzed for the first couple of days with all the pain meds and everything else. And again, I want to tell the story when it's like, when we have the time to properly have the tribute for these people, because they have done so much. And again, this other person in the accident too, everybody came out alive and well, thankfully. And and then you're also dealing with, okay, like, is everybody okay? Like, how is it going to work? And
did some folks pass away in the accident?
No. Like I said, everybody is well and alive. Everybody is well and alive. But then you're in a foreign country, and then it's
Right.
also okay. Insurance, what happens with insurance? What happens with the cars? Driver's license, all this kind of stuff. Thankfully, it all turned out well. Like it went through a proper investigation and whatnot, which had to be. But you're a foreign person, a foreign country, and it was in the beginning for some of the authorities down there. With all my respect here, it was fairly easy for them to say, "Oh yeah, it's the foreign person's fault. It's all on him." And
You were driving?
yeah, and then Australia down there, they're like, "Oh yeah, the foreign guy just drove on the wrong side of the road," and it turns out I wasn't.
Oh, wow.
But that took a long time through the investigation and everything out and everything else, right? But if there's and that was a long investigation, which one of they have a really good task force down there for crash investigations, and that takes a long time to go through all that process. And I think that story at some point has to get told, because other people could be in the same situation right now. Like right now, as we talk, there could be people stuck in Australia or other countries that are not allowed to come home because they were involved in an accident,
Right.
and they took their passports away, or insurance says you can't leave until you get home, or until we make a decision.
Yeah.
And again, I want to make sure the story gets told properly, because it's important for me that people learn from that and are aware of what can happen in this world. And B, I want to make sure nobody understands anything wrong, or something is ripped out of.
Well, what's the takeaway then? If we can't have all of the nuts and bolts, what's the
not today, but
get an Uber when you're in Australia?
You have a dash cam. Don't travel. Don't
Right.
travel without a dash cam.
Interesting.
So that things like this happen, because since then, you connect with other people and you meet people in the hospitals, right? Very interesting too. Lots of conversations in the hospital there, and they're like,
life
that is
stories.
pretty. Oh, and then you meet lawyers along the way, right? And they go like, yeah, that's pretty normal. What do you mean that's normal? Yeah, somebody comes from a different country. It's just basically it's easy for some of the authorities to say, oh yeah, that's their fault. Let's pin it on them.
Yeah.
And but the big portion is everybody is still healthy, which is the main thing. But the aftermath of mentally going through all that stuff while trying to stay alive.
Yeah.
Potential guilt, right? Potential. Somebody says that to you, and you have this in your head, and then month later they tell you, no, it's not your fault. So again, there's a lot of pressure.
How long were you in there? How long were you in the hospital?
I was in the hospital for about a month and a half. And then it was a mix between outpatient physio, and because you're kind of at the point where you're too good, but not good enough to get home yet. You're too good for a hospital.
You can't fly.
Well, or insurance says that this has to get figured out first. So, right, it could be a couple things like that. Why you couldn't fly. So, and then thankfully enough, this Australian family let me live with them down there. So, and I only got connected through that Australian family through a very good contact in Manitoba. It also I didn't even know before I went to Australia. Like there's something called the butterfly effect. You do something good here, and it does something else somewhere else in the world, and that family has done so many great things for me. I was still like, even when I was out of the hospital, I was still learning how to walk and how to move, and I had this upper body brace, like a Miami brace, they call it, goes all the way from here all the way down to your waist. It keeps everything like straight, because the whole basically spine is broken. And you have to roll a certain way in the morning and at night to open it up and change the pads. So you open it up to change the pads, and then you have to roll a certain way while your spine is broken. They can change the pads in the back, roll back, and close it all up again.
Jeez.
Like it's been a day and a half, and I don't wish anybody anything like that. Not even 2% of that. That's just you can't move. You can't. Well, you're getting a bedpan, right, for all your business you got to do. So there is lots of weird stuff that you learn. And again, you had to learn how to walk again Meanwhile, the business is still trying to run in Canada. And I, again, can just be thankful. At this time, we had a couple people, and I always say we as a Bushel Plus is we for me, always has been as a company. But so I say we, but at that time there was a couple people working. One of them became a business partner for a couple of years, which I'm very grateful for all the help along the way there. Right. And you know, they took the company and they ran it like it was their own. And that has just been, you know, we had farmers working trade shows at that time. I was in Australia talking about Ag Days, and the nurses asked my sister and my friend, was a friend of mine, flew down from Brandon down to Australia to spend 3 weeks with us and help my sister and me. And the nurse is like, what is this Ag Days Marcel keeps talking about? And I go, well, it's this trade show in January in Canada. And they're like, you got to tell him that he won't go to Ag Days. It's like, he won't be going anywhere for a long time.
Yeah.
And then you're in a wheelchair for a while, and then you learn how to walk again and do steps and whatnot. So it's a life lesson, and it just shows how quickly life can change. You know, it's a situation and a half. And the amount of people we've met, the farmers that helped out in Australia, the phone chain alone to reach my parents, we figured out had like over 60 some people involved, because now we have, you know, emergency contact forms in the company. Well, guess what? We didn't have that. So it was so many people involved in so many different countries. And my parents at home in Germany sick, right? Because all my family's back in Germany. So there's a lot to uncover in that whole story. And I hope I don't sound like I don't want to tell it. I want to tell it the proper way, where people get credit, and it's not this good story, because it is a very interesting story that hopefully people can take away something. I've done some talks about it, like at churches or like other groups, just to talk about that some of those takeaways. And yeah, the biggest thing is just, the biggest takeaway, some of those freak accidents can happen. It doesn't need to be anybody's fault, but you could be accused of it in a different country, and that's not good. And then hopefully people find the right legal help to get out of that. So,
did faith play a component in survival?
You know what, I grew up Christian, and then in Germany, and then you kind of, you know, you become a teenager, you kind of wander off a little bit, right? And you have a lot of questions, like, how did that work? And how doesn't, you know? And the interesting thing is, the family that rescued me down there, they're from South Africa. It's now my second family, and they're very Christian. And they asked me one day when I was with them, I was still in my brace and on crutches. They're like, do you want to come to church with us? Just a gathering of a bunch of South Africans, you know? And I was like, you know, I'll come with you. I think that would be kind of nice. So they helped me in the car and all that kind of stuff, transferred me out there and walk in there. And within like 5 minutes, I have like, you know, 5 South African women, their hands on my head, on my shoulder, praying for me, right? And like, oh, lovey, what's going on? Just super nice. But I still remember the pastor was talking about the passages in the Bible about strong and courageous, to be strong and courageous. And I don't want to say the wrong thing. I think it was Moses splitting the water. But he had a way of taking these stories out of the Bible that are sometimes really hard to understand or how to interpret it, right? He took them and put a meaning to it into today's society, into today's everyday life, our lives right now, with social media, with work, with entrepreneurship. And he took these stories and made it relatable. And, you know, my mom is sitting beside me, my Australian mom, I call her. She's sitting beside me, and she's like, are you listening? I said, yeah, I'm listening.
Are you listening? Hit you over the head with a rod. Yeah. You're not sleeping, are you?
Yeah, well, if she hit me over the head with a rod that day, like, my neck was still not good then.
Could have been fatal.
So yeah, that would have been fatal. And I was like, yeah, I hear this. So they definitely, what happened, I kept going with them to church, and it definitely kind of put another spark in it. Even in the accident when I woke up and after, and it's been a very interesting journey that has definitely helped. And I kind of felt, I talked to them about a lot about faith, and I was like, well, I always felt a bit bad because I had so many questions about it. It's almost like you grow up Christian, but you feel guilty questioning it because you have questions, because
Yeah.
it's a complicated thing to understand, right? There's other religions out there, are we right, are we wrong? And as a technical brain anyways, you're analyzing stuff. And then they said, like, well, if you wouldn't be a Christian if you wouldn't have questions about all these things. It's normal. And I was like, oh wow, nobody ever said that like that. So I was able to accept some of the faith way of motivational stuff approach, and kept going to that church. And a lot of these things he was saying sounded like all the motivational modern speakers today.
Where do you think it
And
came from?
right?
It's the
Yeah. So
original.
it's like the original. It's probably lots of stories out of our good old Bible. And it's like, holy moly, I'm getting back into it. So
Good for you, man. Whew. Yeah, that's incredible. But what did you learn about your company? Your company survived without you and maybe flourished in some ways. Was that a eureka moment too? It's like, hey, we can scale this thing. It doesn't have to all be me. Because we talked about it, right? Our identity is so tied to the business, but then if the business can go without us, we almost feel a little bit like, hey, wait a minute, like, I need to be important. Like, you can do this without me. But that's Mecca, is the self-managing
yeah,
company, because then you can go and build something else. You might have
yeah.
5 or 10 companies by the time you're done.
Well, yeah. So here's the interesting part. I was out for a bit, but Marcel wouldn't be Marcel if it's pretty quickly a phone with WhatsApp, because I
Yeah.
still had one hand to type and audio messages to figure out a few things. But you're right, I wasn't there the entire time. But what it has taught me is structure, right, and backups, because it cannot all be in one person's head. And that has taught me that you have to have structures in place and more people knowing the same things, and cross training and those kind of things, right? And after I was out of the hospital, I got in. It was almost like working remotely before COVID. I was like
Yeah.
the trendsetter of remote work.
You were zooming before
in,
before the world was zooming.
like that sounds very, very stupid to joke about it here in my head, but yeah, that's almost what it was. But I was working remotely down there in it because I wasn't in a hospital for 8 months. Sorry, 8 months straight. There was a lot of that happening later on, but the first couple of months, obviously, I was out, and I was just providing guidance over the phone, over WhatsApp, those kind of things. So yeah, it doesn't definitely prove that other people can take it too if you have the right people. And at that point, there was good people in place. Like I said, I'm most grateful for the people at the time. And like I said, I was my business partner for a couple of years. It's been a great ride, and yeah, it taught me a lot about organizing things and having backups in place and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. That's a hallmark of a really good company over time. As inventive and creative, as fast moving as you are.
It's the culture, and just yeah, the
I
culture that we
feel
want to keep.
like I feel like we're coming to the end of the road here, because I don't know where how we would top this last segment. I mean, I am really interested in kind of the A to Z of how you scaled the company, because you were talking about in the Brandon Chamber of the Brandon Chamber.
Brandon Chapman of waffles. Yeah, yeah.
I just made that shit up. I think it's gonna be big. I
Oh,
think it's gonna be
actually, we
big.
should start it. I'm all
We
over
could
that
have
for
breakfast
waffles.
there, the Brandon Chamber of Waffles.
You sent Connor an email about that. Yeah, well, let's get that going. Connor, if you're listening, just if your team is on it, just get some waffles going, would you? Thank you.
Oh, where was I going? That no, you were talking about in your speech there how you expanded super rapidly here recently. I'm sure it's like a hockey stick, but it takes a while to get that good to great flywheel going. you're pushing really hard, you're pushing on a string, and all of a sudden, but what was it like scaling the company for you?
Oh, it's been wild. The last 2 years, 2.5 years have been really wild with the scaling. We went from just a couple of people to now about 30. We're exporting in about 33 different countries, as you mentioned. We're actively operating in the US. We have US employees. A lot of it was to make the decision of, okay, I can either just, kind of keep doing this as a kind of, yeah, we're doing this, or we're going to give her shit, full tilt, everything on one card and give her hard, talk to the banks, put that in place, put money in place, build the right business plan, get the right people on board. Very fortunate to work with some good people around that. Yeah. And that's something for part 2, because that's a really interesting story.
I think we're in part 6 already. Part 2. Something for part 2. I don't think my bladder can handle part 2 today.
Well, we're not doing part 2 today. Just everybody.
No, you have to come back. Yeah,
I had to like
back.
we wanted to do this before Agritechnica, and it's like, oh, let's do it before. And it's just been a crazy week. So I appreciate you being patient.
Are you going to take a dash cam to Agritechnica?
Yeah, there will be a dash cam. We got a travel dash cam. Yeah. There's no speed limits on the highways in Germany.
Yeah,
on the Autobahn, right?
On the Autobahn.
You have to get used to that first.
That would hurt. So. Yeah, even with that German engineering, that would still hurt.
Yep.
I'm going to try and bring it home with one question. It kind of relates to one of the themes that we've been touching on often here, my friend, is that living in the gap, what's it going to take to be happy? How can we learn to be happy as, entrepreneurs with an insatiable ambition and desire? If we were talking on the podcast, we should try and do it again sooner, but say we were talking on the podcast 3 years from now, what would have had to have happened for you to feel like a success?
Man, you're getting deep today. I knew. See, I've been on a lot of interviews and podcasts, but I knew why I don't know. I was nervous about this one with you because you're the Joe Rogan of Brandon. Oh, it's like
Brandon. Yeah,
just like Canada, when I say, sorry,
just when I say like she's Brandon hot.
That's not what I meant.
It's like, relatively speaking, it's like hot for Brandon. Like it's like hot within like 150 people, not like 1.5 billion.
Okay, now you're talking. Shut up. Now you're talking yourself down again here, my friend. That's not how I meant it at all.
And I should stop that. It's a bad habit of being very self-depreciating or whatever, And as hard as we are on other people, myself, I'm speaking, people around me, I think it's because I'm the most critical on myself. So it's hard to realize, But what would
that's why I keep interrupting you and tell you not to do it. But you asked me a great question, so
answer it then.
Okay. 3 years from now, what would it take for me to be happy looking back?
Yeah.
If in 3 years we can still if we have achieved to stay true to our brand pillars of the farmer success we're very passionate about, and have that technical excellence where our solutions help farmers and people around the world put more grain in the bin. And that sounds like a very standard thing, but that is our passion for the company. But in conjunction of that, to have a company that can be not just a job for employees, but can really be a career and a place they want to work and a place they like to contribute and where they feel like, yes, we're doing something together. If we can achieve that in the next 3 years and become this employer of choice, and we can offer our employees those opportunities to grow within the company and help them with their families and their growth personally and in business. And again, at the same time, keeping all the customers happy and keep up with demand and keep up with the knowledge transfer and really helping everybody out. I think that would be looking back and saying, wow, we were able to scale, but at the same time, we stayed true to our first days early days values of doing the right thing for the customer and for our team. We're trying to do things different for the team. I mean, you swore a couple of times right now on the podcast or on this podcast. So I think I can say it once. I worked for enough. I worked for enough assholes in my life that I know how I don't want to be and how I don't want to run a company. Okay. So, and I want to do things different with our team, because when you look after your team, your customers are getting looked after as well. And the customers are super, super important, no doubt about it. And I love to talk to the customers. I love to get that feedback, good and bad. But your people have to be there to support it, because we all spend more time at work than we spend with our families. You and me, anyways, but also the team and the employees, right? 8 hours a day, you're gone from home or more. Our salespeople are traveling a lot. Technical, like product specialists, we have like that they're traveling a lot. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate this team. And when we can keep everybody healthy along the way and engaged and growing, that's something I would look back in 3 years and say, wow, actually we were able to do this. And we just rolled out a brand new benefits program here for December 1st. That is that's more than competitive for everybody. So again, you need you're a small brand and company, right? Like we're not in the Silicon Valley, and we're not in a massive city and attract all the talent, but there is really, really good people around here. And we have a lot of really good remote people in other areas, but you have to, as a company, you have to offer them things that are different than somewhere else, because you got to keep them around. And I'm truly passionate about them, not just to keep them around, but about them, so they can grow as individuals.
You're the equivalent of Brandon. You're the equivalent of Brandon Hott.
Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. I like Brandon.
Well, I'm so glad that you didn't say, well, I'm going to sell 13,000 Bushel Pluses Pros drop pans to all the combines in Saskatchewan, because then I was going to challenge you. I was ready to challenge you right off the hop. I'm like, what if that doesn't happen, Marcel? Are you not going to be happy if you don't get to your goals? Like, Mr. Got to take over the world. But those things that you talked about are things that you actually can control. And, they're measurable, but they're the kind of metrics that you can strive for and feel internal satisfaction. And sometimes you're going to hit those marks as far as, production and KPIs and EBITDA and all that stuff. Right.
Yeah.
But man, net worth is all in our network, in our relationships, in our social capital. And even as things get more automated, like I could have taken all the stuff on social media and made a Marcel Kringe with AI, but it wouldn't be the real thing. It wouldn't be you. It wouldn't have all
it wouldn't have the accent.
No, it would have a perfect Marcel accent, but it still wouldn't be you. And so as much as we get all this technology going and it does so much for us, I think even more so because of that. It's about people. Like a generation or two ago, it was much more about like hauling of water and hewing of wood, and how much could you do of that? How hard did you work? All that stuff. Now it's much more about relationships and building a team. And you've done an excellent job, and I'm really proud of you. And I knew it was going to be a fantastic episode to have you on. It's meant a lot to me that you take the time. I know you're really busy, but it's just, you're such a big inspiration to me here, right in Brandon. Oh, you're Brandon Hott.
I appreciate it. It's funny because I look up to you and I figure out how you do it all. So I appreciate that.
Man. Yeah. No, well, that's funny how we look at each other, but no, funny. I'm really proud of you. And I think it's so cool to be watching your journey. And I think about what's possible and where it's going to go. And yeah, it will be interesting because I don't know if you know enough, and I know you don't think this way, but every business should be
I
built.
don't know enough. I don't know enough.
What I mean is you don't know enough. I think you're attached to your company in a way that you haven't thought this way a lot yet. But correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not one of these business guys that wakes up in the morning and said, like, every business that I'm going to build is going to be built to sell. You're not thinking that built to sell yet. But the funny part is, and I got a book for you, Built to Sell. And I had him on my podcast in the early days. John Warlow. He has a podcast that's exclusive. It's Built to Sell Radio. That's exclusively about entrepreneurs that have sold their companies. And the stories that come out of that are absolutely incredible, and the learning. But there's something there, whether you're actually building to sell or not. The way that you would build to sell is so critical in a company. It's like when you went to Australia there and got in that situation. It's all about building that process and not being involved. And one of the metrics that people look at when they go to buy a business like yours is, how much does the founder actually do? Like, they'll ask, who does your invoicing? And if the founder's answer is like, well, I usually try and get the invoicing done because nobody else can do it right, but I generally do it on like Saturday evenings or Sundays.
Yeah.
And then they're like, okay, next, right?
Yeah.
You can't. And sometimes, just like we talked, the pros and cons of business, there are things that your company can't do unless it kind of goes to that stage where there's capital or levels of whatever, and maybe you won't want that. But I think, even in 3 years, like, you can't tell me you haven't had people picking up the phone and saying, hey, you got a number? Like, you got to sell the company one day, Marcel. Be real.
Well,
It's
don't
your
push
duty.
me, Dan. If you want it, just tell me.
Push me.
Like, don't push me. Like, just tell me that you want
Yeah,
it.
I'm gonna get him.
And then
I got
just
a checkbook in here somewhere.
yeah, like,
Oh, I have right here.
being pretty aggressive. Hey, oh, there you go. Oh, look at that. Well, you started writing. No, here's the thing. Like, it's not really, it's not really built to sell here at Bushel Plus. But what I find interesting, what the concept is, you still have to build a company with the proper processes if you sell or you don't sell, because these processes will make your business better. If Marcel has to come in on a Saturday, or the founder to invoice and do all these things, that's not scalable. What I find interesting in this whole concept is the scalability of making it work. Have the people do what they do best, and not the founder doing everything. That's not scalable. But currently, I can tell you right now, it's currently not in discussion. It's currently not the goal. It's actually the opposite. We're going to expand. We purchased Mad Concaves last summer and officially took over in the fall. So now Mad Concaves is, it's now called Bushel Plus Mad Concaves. So we bought out Mad Concaves. That's a whole nother episode for part 3. And, we are continuing egg training in Germany. And I'm sure there will be a couple other companies that are going to be part of Bushel Plus in the next couple of years. So currently, we're actually looking for ourselves to grow in this whole marketplace. So we're currently doing the opposite. But
it's so funny, though, that you think that way.
But
God bless you.
But
because well, you think of it, okay, well, no, we're going to keep the company, we're going to keep expanding, but there will come a time. It's nature, it's physics, whereby in order to expand and go much longer, just like when you realize when you're in a hospital bed in Australia, you got to work on the scalability of this thing. At some point, like, there's levels in business, and at some point you're going to need to take, of course, companies can stay private and go on their own forever and a day. But at some point, if you're truly serving the business, just like your kids one day will grow up and move out and go on and do their own things. That might be the best thing for the viability of the company. But regardless of whether you're going to, thinking about selling or not, but I'm just telling you, man, and you might become that entrepreneur, that founder, that inventor, where your best service to the world, being Brandon hot as you are, is actually If you can,
Is
if
that
you're listening to this,
does that
he's wiggling
qualify
his
me?
ears, which I'm sure the ladies find fascinating from across the room. You just wiggle your ears, and that's a signal for them to probably come approach you. But anyways, I'm not going to lecture you too much about it, but I just think that that's something you should think. I should give you this book, or you should listen to that podcast.
Here's the thing, Dan. One of the reasons why I also don't make a big fuss about that or talk about that, especially like, I mean, I'm on your podcast, so I appreciate you asking me those questions. But our employees and team will also probably listen to this podcast, right? And I think
I totally get that.
I think it's also for, and again, I'm not picking on anybody, but if a founder goes out and actively says things like, "Oh yeah, we're going to sell this," and I'm going to walk away from it, I find it very disrespectful to the team and the people that work their ass off in there, right? So again, this is not, could it happen? Never say never, right?
Yeah.
But if it would happen, and this is just a big if, okay, so everybody bear with me here, it would have to be a very well upwritten deal where I know culture will change. It does change when things like this happen, or certain things change. But it has to be that people have a future and that people are looked after, okay? And that certain things have to stay a certain way, because otherwise Bushel Plus, like that's what Bushel Plus, that is what made Bushel Plus successful. And again, the biggest thing is the people at Bushel Plus and the team. And if there's ever something like this happening, it will only happen if it's the right decision for the company and the people. And it may, but I can tell you honestly,
that's what I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
It may, but all I'm saying today is it's not in my mind right now. We're actually looking at acquiring other businesses. And I welcome every contact that somebody has out there that wants to chat with us. I love talking to other innovative people and see what they may want to do with us, or in any kind of partnerships. We are very open to this and helping others grow as well. But that's kind of where my head is right now. And I actually had a couple of people asking me in the interview. They're like, "Hey, Marcel, am I going to start here, and then 12 months from now you're going to sell this thing, and then it's all changing?" I said no, and I gave him the same answer as I gave you. So it's not in my mind. We're actually going the opposite. It may happen. Never say never. We don't know what's going to happen. Like, would have you thought that half the world is in a war as it is right now a few years ago? If somebody would have ever told you about COVID 10 years ago, would you believed it? Right? We don't know what life is throwing at us. But you have to be prepared with the right processes just to have a better company. Sell or not sell, you need to have a company structured.
I totally agree with what you said there, and that's completely the context of what I think about it, and and it is a very dangerous thing to say to employees, that you're going to sell this as though somehow the culture and the family that you built is going to dramatically change overnight, and it'll be sort of heartlessly sold down the river for a big old check. No, so you can build a big house on the hill in Brandon. But I think what I mean is, oftentimes businesses evolve, they are best served by growing in that fashion, and not doing so as a disservice to your company and employees. And you'll know if and when that time ever comes. But regardless, building to sell is a good strategy. But we could debate all that stuff till the cows come home as entrepreneurs, and we will continue to. You should get that. I say you should. I'm shooting you now. Hey, you should. You got lots of time on your hands. You should get that entrepreneurial group going again.
Oh, right. That was a good group. I like that.
I loved it. It was fun.
We got to get back together on that and have our entrepreneurial self-help groups. Almost feels like a self-help group when you get a bunch of entrepreneurs in a room here in Brandon Hot.
Well, I tell you, Friday nights, I'm just fried. I was thinking about that, and that's when I'm at my lowest, is Friday nights and whatnot. So maybe every second Friday night or something, we should have a little get together and have a happy hour or something at the end of the day, and really we might feel better by sharing our problems and maybe our wins too. It's not always, some Fridays I'm celebrating, but lots of Fridays I'm like, Oh my God.
If I ever get to talk when you're around. Today, it was the most time I could ever talk with you.
I know. It's usually when I see you at a trade show, it's like, okay, go.
It's usually you talking.
That's what I love about this is I've hopefully learned to talk less. I actually talk more in this podcast than I usually do because I just got excited about what we are jamming about there. I try to ask questions like with 5 words in them, like 5-word sentence, and then just shut up and let people talk. It's amazing what I don't experience this in real life. It's amazing what you can find out and what people talk about when you actually like listen and then ask another question instead of like saying, yeah, that's like a time when I did this. It's incredible what you find out. And we found out a lot of incredible things today. So anyways, thanks so much, man. Really proud of you. I love you lots. You're a good man. You're a good friend. And
hey, likewise, I'm proud of you. I love you. Thank you very much for the opportunity here. And thank you for this. It's been a long time coming. So Dan's
you
been
could
hunting me
tell
for a while.
we just shot out of the gate. The 10-part series. That time Marcel was in Siberia, part 4. But it is amazing because you do have all this like these crazy stories, and I would love to hear them all one day. So anyways, thanks a lot for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, right on. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening. And yeah, thank you everybody out there for all the support. I very much appreciate it. Thanks for making Canada home.
Anybody in Western Canada, I'm pretty sure you know how to get a hold of Marcel, but just for the people that didn't know how Brandon hot you were before this episode, how do they get a hold of you?
The best way to get a hold of us is website bushelplus.com, or you find us on all social media platforms under @bushelplus, or you find me on LinkedIn under Marcel Kringe, Marcel Kringe, and yeah, reach out. Love to hear from people and our team. Our products are in most dealerships across Canada. Walk into your dealer and ask about Bushel Plus products. If it's
I wish we
smart pen systems or mini
yeah.
combine. So
man, I
we didn't even get into this.
I know. Well,
but
we got to do it again.
Oh yeah,
we got to do it
cool.
again. All right, thanks, brother.
Right on. Hey, thank you very much. See ya.